This is my 8th video on my attempts to construct a small 00 gauge layout. See part 1 for my reasons for doing this and my lengthy series on my N-gauge railway modelling for more interesting stuff with trains actually running, etc. This part deals with my build of the Metcalfe Parish Church card kit, PO226. This is probably the most complex Metcalfe card kit that I've built, and I do want to show the build in some detail, so this will probably be a slightly long video. I will say, however, that though complex, this kit was well thought out and put together, although there were a couple of minor errors, as almost always seems to be the case with Metcalfe kits. And overall, the build, though longish, was not unduly difficult or discouraging. It helps that you get ongoing satisfaction from admiring each section as you complete it. Here's what you get when you open the kit. 2 folded sheets of instructions, complex build as noted, 1 triply folded sheet of heavy card support pieces, 4 doubly folded sheets of printed card pieces, 1 sheet of laser cut parts, mainly for the stone inserts in the windows, 1 sheet of acetate window glazing parts, 1 paper sheet with some detail parts, a standard set of Metcalfe roof ridge tiles with a choice of 2 colours, and a small card sheet with some extra printed stonework. Here's the triply folded sheet of heavy card parts opened out. There are quite a few of these parts, and nothing is printed on the part sheet as it comes. There is a key in the first instruction sheet identifying these parts. This can be seen at the top left in this picture. With this kit I elected to pencil the part IDs onto the heavy card sheet at the start of the build, so I wouldn't have to keep going back to the key to identify them. The glazing parts as they come are just printed in black on the transparent acetate sheet. I had seen on forums, etc., that some people did some colouring of these window pieces to make stained glass, basically. You can also buy entire sets of coloured stained glass pieces for this kit on eBay. I did look at those, but I decided that I really didn't like them all that much. Also, I was not intending to put lights into the church, so there was probably no point in getting too fancy with the windows. But I decided that I would try to do some basic colouring of the 2 large west and east windows of the church. For this purpose I got out colours from a set of fine line markers, which have already seen quite a bit of use on Metcalfe kits, mainly for colouring in card edges. Here are my attempts at colouring the windows. I didn't try to draw any specific religious scenes, I just put in a mix of colours that might pass seen approximately as reasonable in stained glass windows. Here's a closer view of the east window after colouring. I coloured on the reverse side from the black printing, so there would be no danger of my colouring damaging the black frames. The marker colours did not dry very well on the acetate. It was necessary to go over several times, sometimes to get a clear colour. And I was very nervous that touching the coloured side might mess everything up, so I handled these pieces very carefully, never touching the coloured sides at all right through to the final assembly. Once the kit was completed, the coloured sides were on the insides of the church and so safe from disturbance. I decided to leave all of the smaller window pieces as they came, so just as leaded windows with clear glass. So after colouring the east and west windows, I got on with the kit assembly as per the instructions. The first part to be assembled is the tower. This is the main tower part with the crenellations at the top folded over and glued down. These are the windows for the tower. Rather than glazing, these have louvers which are represented by printed card pieces. These windows would have louvers in order to allow the sound of the bells to go out. And indeed the ringing of the bells might even break glass windows if you put them so close to the bells. Here are the tower louvered windows made up. A printed card frame at the front with laser cut stonework behind, and then the printed louvers behind that. The west window goes into the tower. Here is my west window made up with its laser cut stonework and its outer frame. But I left actually fitting this to the tower until the last possible moment because of concern about the permanence of the colouring. Here the louvered windows have been fitted to the tower. I think the effect of those is quite good. These are the pieces for the top of the tower. There's a flat roof piece and then a four-sided pyramid that goes into the centre of that flat piece. The small piece at bottom left is a paper joiner which you have to cut out from the detail sheet in order to help with the assembly of the pyramid. Here the tower roof has been assembled and the tower is folded round the roof and also round two heavy card formers which act as intermediary floors. Note that I still haven't fitted the west window. Now, as I was ready to close up the tower, I did finally fit the west window into the tower wall where it belongs. Actually, it will really never look this pretty again, as I'm not intending to put lights inside the church, although I can certainly see why many people do, but it would only really make sense if the layout as a whole was to support night operations, which is not something I intend. And now the tower is closed up. Mind you, it's not really completed, as later buttresses will be fitted and also more parts in the roof area, etc. The tower attaches to the rest of the church on the side opposite to the west window. A heavy card piece is glued on there to support the ends of the walls of the nave when the attachment is made. The nave is the next section to be built. This is essentially the central body of the church. Here 6 small leaded windows have been made up and fitted to the nave walls. Here you can see the nave walls from the back. Note that there are heavy card pieces glued to the walls wrapping round the windows on both sides. This whole kit build is thoroughly reinforced with heavy card pieces, resulting in a very solid and quite heavy building. Now the walls of the nave are folded round and supported in position with a folded heavy card beam. Next, the roof support for the nave has to be made up. This is a teeny bit fiddly. The piece comes out as a flat rectangle with 2 tabs stabbed into it. You have to fold up the 2 tabs, then you need to make supports for the tabs yourself from spare heavy card. These don't come as parts. I actually use supporting pieces left over from my recent platform builds, cut down appropriately, as the supports mustn't stick up at all above the form of the tabs themselves. Once that part is made up properly, with the tabs supported in the vertical position, the printed roof itself is folded and glued on. Note that equal amounts of the heavy card piece are left showing on each side, representing the gutters. Now that assembled roof is glued between the nave walls. Next, specific edging pieces need to be glued to the insides of the walls around the roof. This is also fiddly. I found that the side pieces seemed to be a bit too long and I had to trim the ends to get them to fit. Now the nave can be attached to the tower, taking care as far as possible to ensure that the roof and all of the walls join up properly. Here's a view of what we got so far without flash, so showing the colours more naturally. The next section to be made up is the chancel. This is the section with the altar, etc. that goes at the front of the church, although this kit doesn't include interior parts which you wouldn't see anyway, so there is no altar as such. Note the rather odd, almost swastika-shaped heavy card supporting pieces glued carefully in place round the arches and the windows. Here's the chancel wall from the outer side. It will have 6 plain leaded windows and also the large east window. And here is the east window made up with its stonework and frame ready to be fitted. And now the east window is fitted to the chancel walls. I did this after fitting the plain windows as the last thing before folding the walls and fixing them. Again, I took the opportunity to take a picture of this window as it will never really be seen this well once the body of the church is closed up. The chancel roof works the same way as the nave roof, though it's smaller. You have to fold up the tabs and then make your own supports to fix those tabs vertically. Then the peak printed roof is fixed over the tabs, leaving the gutters at the side. Then the roof is fitted into the chancel walls, and edging pieces are fitting round the insides of the walls round the roof, Then the chancel can be glued onto the nave. So here we have the central body of the church assembled for its full length. The only substantial sections still missing are the side aisles. There are another 8 leaded windows for the side aisles, each made up with 2 layers of framing. Note that these windows are of 2 types, rectangular ones to go along the side walls of the aisles, and ones with sloped tops to go into the end walls of the aisles. The instructions do caution you to be very careful with these windows, as the sloped end windows must fit into the walls very precisely or things won't assemble properly. It's necessary to check them and trim them as needed before gluing things together. I decided to glue the aisle walls round their heavy card bases first before fitting the windows. This way I could be sure that the windows actually fitted into the spaces remaining for them. Then, after the walls were firmly glued to the bases, I fitted all of the windows. Note how close the end window pieces come to the edges of the walls. They mustn't protrude beyond at all, or it won't be possible to fit the aisles to the rest of the church properly. Now the outer doors can be glued into the aisles. Note that these doors don't go all the way down. There is intended to be a gap under each of them. One of these doors will have the porch fitted over it, and the porch floor will go into the gap under the door. The other door will get a doorstep piece fitted into the gap. Next, the aisle roofs are fitted. These simulate leaded roofing and fit over the tops of the window pieces. They must be fitted precisely so that their edges line up exactly with the walls and will fit properly to the walls of the nave. Here are the aisles seen from the inside. Edging pieces have been glued round the insides of the walls around the roofs again. All of these edging pieces that go round the roof come as specific parts from the printed sheets, but I did find that they weren't always exactly the right size and they needed a little trimming here and there, so it's wise to try the fit first and trim as needed before applying glue. This was where I ran into a bit of an issue with the kit. The instructions say to fit the aisles to the nave, taking care to get the notches in the base of the aisles fitted round the pillars. Well, that's all very well for the 2 pillars towards the right, which fit nicely into notches in the aisle base, and the section of the nave wall at left also fits nicely into a cutout in the aisle base. Actually, I beg your pardon, that's actually the chancel wall, but anyway, the section of the chancel wall at left also fits nicely into a cutout in the aisle base. But in the middle there's a problem where the nave and chancel join. The cutout in the aisle base is not big enough for the pillars at the junction of the nave and the chancel to fit into. I'm talking about the area above my thumb in this picture. You can see that there is a small notch in the base, but it needs to be extended further to the left in order to go over the other parts and really fit properly. It needs to be almost, well, more than twice as long as it currently is. I was certain that the aisles wouldn't fit to the rest of the church properly without altering the aisle bases, so I cut out beside the existing notch to extend it as needed. I didn't worry too much about making this precise. So long as the base could go in as needed round the nave and chancel pillars, it wouldn't really matter if this area didn't actually touch. Here you can see the results after my cutout. I did cut out rather too much, but too much is better than too little, as it's important that the aisles should be able to fit flush against the sides of the church. Once I was comfortable that the aisles would now fit in place, I glued them. I did this kind of gluing on a piece of foam board, both to ensure a really flat surface under things as I fitted them together, and to avoid getting glue on my cutting mat. And here's the church now with all its main sections in place without flash. There are still quite a lot of details to do, but this is the basic building. At this point I took the church down and tried it on the layout. Apart from anything else, the next step of assembly would be to fit the entry porch to the church. The porch can be fitted on either side, and I wanted to be sure that I fitted it to suit the intended location of the church on my layout. The paper under the church here is just a template I'd made up before, roughly to the size of the church in order to see where it might go. Now, back on the bench, the entry porch is made up, with a small glazed window and walls doubled by folding. Then the porch walls are folded round the porch base, again on a piece of foam board here. And the porch is glued over the aisle door on the chosen side, with a protruding part of the porch floor going under the aisle door. Next, there are some extra parts to go onto the tower. These are buttresses, which must be made up by folding the printed parts round formers made up of several heavy card pieces glued together. This is tricky to do properly. I found the best way was to first glue the printed parts to the heavy card formers all along the continuous side. Then the folding sections can be glued round the former one section at a time. It is more important to get the sections square than to fit them precisely to the former. So I'm folding and gluing each section with the inner side of the buttress pressed to the board and ensuring that the outer sides of each section are parallel to the board so that the whole thing is square. Then the buttresses go onto the corners of the tower. They should be glued on as precisely as possible to come out at a 45-degree angle, so I'm using the markings on my cutting mat to help me with this. Next, there are capping stones for each section of the buttresses. These do not come as card parts. You have to cut them out from the paper detail sheet, as seen here. I think that fitting these capping stones to the buttresses was probably the most fiddly part of the whole kit assembly. Being paper, they're not at all rigid, and it's hard to get them glued sensibly in place on the buttresses. This was the best I could do. Hopefully it will look okay under normal conditions. Next, there are some additional detail parts for the top of the tower. Card turrets need to be made up and glued to each corner. The instructions show 2 capping stones for these turrets, but in fact only single capping stones were provided. Here are the turrets, folded and glued as best as I could do them with their capping stones. There are also a bunch of little paper pieces provided for improving the tops of the tower crenellations. I cut these out, scored them, and then folded them double. Then each one was glued double. I elected to just put these paper pieces on the tops of the main crenellations, as these most needed improvement where they were folded over when the tower was first made. The turrets have also been glued into place here. The next thing to be done was ridge tiles for the roofs. I used the grey ridge tiles as I thought these made a better effect for a church than the red tiles. Here sections of ridge tiling have been cut to length and glued to the peaks of the nave and chancel roofs. Capping stones have also been glued to the tops of all the walls. I wasn't too happy with this, as it's almost impossible to get the capping stones to join up realistically where the different wall sections connect at various angles. The whole building is really approaching completion now. I'm fairly happy with it. I particularly like the windows. As noted, the junctions of the capping stones bug me a bit. This doorstep piece needs to go under the aisle door on the other side to where the porch was fitted. Now that's in place, this side is mostly complete. And back to the porch side. And without flash. Things really do look a lot more natural without flash. There are still a couple of things to do. 2 different styles of clock faces are provided on the paper detail sheet. I decided to use the squared faces, and I cut them out and used black marker to make the edges evenly black. I also decided to try to put ridge tiles onto the tower roof. I'm not sure if this was a good idea. I used a soft lead pencil to shade the edges and folds before trying to fit the tiles in place. Here is the tower roof with the tiles in place. Not sure if the tiles are an improvement, as it was very hard to join the sections properly on the pyramid there, but it seemed that there should be ridge tiles at those roof junctions. And here's the tower with the clock face in place. The kit also comes with a Lich Gate and a short section of wall. Here the sections of the Lich Gate are assembled. The Lich Gate walls are folded round the 2 base pieces, and inner and outer door frames are assembled, including laser-cut gates. And here are the door frames with the gates in place. Then the Lich Gate gets a roof and ridge tiles and capping stones. Then laser-cut crosses go onto the Lich Gate and the end of the chancel. Really getting close to completion now. The Lich Gate will provide entry to the churchyard with a path going to the church entry porch. I wasn't quite sure what to do about walls for the churchyard. Finally, I decided that I should fit the small wall sections to the side of the Lich Gate. Apart from anything else, these are required to hide the joins in the side of the Lich Gate. So here's the Lich Gate done. Now I went back to the layout and tried to make a template for the churchyard. I've sketched in blue marker approximately where all of the churchyard walls should go. Things may not end up precisely like this, but this is my basic guide for the church and churchyard. I had one pack of Scaledale stone walling, and I experimented with using that for most of the churchyard wall. I thought that I could use the extra stonework provided with the church kit to make a finished front wall for the churchyard, where the blue line is at top left here. I wasn't entirely clear how the stone walling was supposed to work, as all of the pieces were stepped at both ends, so how were you supposed to make flat ends for walls? I ended up sawing the step off from one of the pieces with a razor saw. Then I could fit the cut-off step into another piece, producing two pieces with flat ends. These flat ends were then intended to join up with the finished wall sections. I painted over the cut part. I sorted out some capping stones from the Metcalfe platform kit for the wall extension I wanted to build, and used a piece of scrap card to go between the inner and outer wall faces to bring them to the same thickness as the existing Lich Gate walls. I moved the rough stone walling sections down onto the layout. For the moment they're just tentatively placed, not glued. I've ordered a bunch more of this type of resin rough stone walling from a UK eBay vendor with the idea of completing the churchyard wall and also doing other walling on the layout. Back on the bench, I measured and cut out sections for my wall extension. 2 pieces of printed stonework will sandwich an inner card. This makes a rigid wall finished on both sides. Then a piece is cut and scored to make an end post. The end post is glued round the end of the wall and capping stones for it to cut. The capping stones are fitted to the end post, then this wall can attach to the side of the Lich Gate wall to make a finished wall for the front of the churchyard. The very last thing to assemble is the church notice board. This is how the instructions say to do it. Somewhat typically, I decided to go my own way. I cut out round the printed notices to the size of the frame. Then I used a black marker to extend the black board a bit and soft pencil to grey the edges. Then I glued that piece to the back of the front laser cut frame, and then glued that assembly to the back section of the board and glued on the top. I did it this way because I thought my chances of getting a neat result were better this way. So there we are. The church and the churchyard walls, or at least most of them, are tentatively placed on the layout. Of course, the churchyard itself needs to be completed. I'll put in a gravel path between the Lich Gate and the porch, and probably some gravel all round the walls of the church. And I have some Scaledale gravestones to go into the churchyard, and there will be more work on grass and vegetation. It's a bit unfortunate that trains go so close to the church, but it's hard to avoid with a big church on a small layout. I think the church itself does look good, both from the front and the back. Here's a passenger train going past the church. Too close, as I say, but it really can't be helped. So, that's basically the end of this part. More to be done on the churchyard, as I say. But on the principle of getting major parts in place first, I'll move on to other kits for now and return to the churchyard later.